you're in control. Manukau and Waitemata, southwest 10 knots, easing to variable 5 this morning, southerly 10 for a time this afternoon. Hodaki Gulf, southwest 15, becoming southeast 10 knots this morning, and Bream head to Cape Colville, southwest 20, gusting 30 about the channel, changing southeast 10 knots everywhere this morning, then easing to variable 5 by the afternoon. The high tide at Auckland, 7:30 tonight, Onehunga, 10:15 this morning. Auckland today, fine, southerlies easing this morning. Tomorrow, expect another fine day and ahead to Thursday. Partly cloudy, chance of a shower in the afternoon. 20's the high, currently 11 here at News Talk ZB.
The breakfast show you can trust. The Mike Hosking Breakfast with the Range Rover Sport, setting the benchmark in sporting luxury. News Talk ZB.
23 minutes away from 8. Peter Gordon with some food chat for you after 8 o'clock. We'll look forward to the catch-up. Meantime, the Prime Minister is back in the country and is with us. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good to be with you.
So the 757, just little short of a miracle that it took off, landed.
12 times.
I saw you leaving, and I thought, what sort of trouble are you buying yourself? So it does work and can work.
It can work. It's like all planes. If they're used, when they run hot, they seem to work. And so we did 12 takeoffs and landings, and everything was perfect, and the Defence Force did a brilliant job. So, and most importantly, we had a fantastic trip. I mean, it was a great, you come away going, man, there's a great potential for New Zealand in the next coming decades.
In what way, tangibly? Did anything tangible come out of it?
Yeah, look, in all those countries, we're upgrading what's called our strategic partnerships with those countries. There was I took 25 business leaders with us. A number of them closed out deals while we were actually there. A number have actually started deals by virtue of the interactions they had with different businesses up there. I spoke to one of our delegation. He was heading back to the Philippines in 2 weeks' time as a function of the conversations he had on the week. So, you just realise there's rapidly rising middle classes. New Zealand's future sits in Southeast Asia. There's just so much potential in those big markets: Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia.
Okay, having said that, there was some suspicion that we're moving towards the Americans with AUKUS by the arrival in the Philippines. And you're trying to argue nothing has changed on AUKUS, but Helen Clark's there with Bob Carr,
yes,
and they're moving ground, presumably. Are we moving in any way, shape or form geopolitically towards the Americans?
Well, our view is that AUKUS is actually good for regional stability and security, and actually the security issues and the economic issues are now interdependent. If you don't have strong stability in the region, you can't get the economic interests advanced. If you don't get the economic advance, you end up with instability and therefore security challenges. So we think it's a good thing. What we're doing is the same position that the Labor government had, which is exploring Pillar 2 and what that may mean. Up until just 2 weeks ago, there wasn't even a pathway to start those conversations. Right. Our officials do that in coming months. The frustrating thing is that I always had a view in opposition that actually we're New Zealand Inc. out there in the world on foreign affairs, and I didn't use foreign affairs as something political. I appreciate the other guys have opposed the TPP and then were for the CPTPP, and it's unclear whether this is Helen Clark or Phil Twyford or Chris Hipkins' position at the moment. So, the reality is we will explore it because we want to make sure if there's opportunities for New Zealand to participate in strengthening our own security, it's in our interest to do so. We'll do it.
Is AUKUS anti-Chinese?
No, I don't think so. I think it's not targeted at one particular country. It's just making sure that we've got good security scaffolding and apparatus within the region. And you see that within the trade space. You see it in security spaces. You see mini-laterals, as they're called, between the US, Japan and the Philippines. And there's no doubt about it. It's a more contested sort of region. It's in our interest, it's in our national interest to make sure it's secure.
Very good piece in one of the Australian papers the other day that was suggesting the problem with AUKUS is that you cannot trust the Americans in the long term. The Americans get exercised about a place until they aren't exercised about a place. And the moment you're in relationships with them, they're going to let you down. And they were referring, obviously, to Australia. But that would apply to us, wouldn't it?
Well, I'll just say to you, we very much talk about it. We take pride in an independent foreign policy. What I'd say to you is actually 195 other countries in the world should have an independent foreign policy too. So that just means we act in New Zealand's national interests, and we look at it and we say it's actually in our interest to have a secure Indo-Pacific region. It's in our interest to advance our economic interests in that region. That's why you've seen a reset of where our priorities are going into that part of the world, because there's lots of opportunity. So, no, I just disagree. I think we'll end up making our own independent decision about what works for us and our interests.
The 41 million, a lot of people exercised about this and texting me about the 41 million you gave to that climate fund. Why are we have no money for a start. And whatever we do have, why aren't we spending it here, not there?
Well, what we have is MFAT, or Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, have what's called an overseas development budget. It's typically focused on the Pacific Islands and Southeast Asia. That's where this money's come from. What we've done here, I think, is quite smart, actually. We've taken that money and we've worked with the Asia Development Bank, which has huge credibility, and importantly, they go off and attract money from the private sector and other government investments to actually do renewable energy projects across Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is about 20% renewable across on balance, and when you can actually build out a decent piece of infrastructure and kit around energy and actually properly get it sorted, that has huge productivity gains for Southeast Asian countries, and it's a good way for us to make sure that they're moving forward. So I get it, we've got tough times at home as well, and we've got to focus on climate issues here at home, but we've also got to focus on fixing the books and getting things in shape.
Third year in a row we've reduced our emissions. That was last week's news. Is it worth it when Transpower yet again this winter say we probably don't have enough power on a cold morning?
Well, that's why we've said, that the previous government's focus on 100% renewables. That last 5%, 10% is really expensive and really difficult. And that's why you've got to use oil and gas, and particularly gas as a transitory source for the next, probably 20 years or so as we make that transition. So for us, that's why we want to, double the amount of renewable electricity in this country. And we can, because we've got abundant solar, wind.
When does that come on, though? Because for all the rhetoric that Shane Jones is so good at about mining and coal and stuff like that, when does it actually arrive? Because I'm sick of being told in 2024 that you've got to be careful on a cold morning. It's bollocks.
Yeah, no, I get it. And but what we've started to do is things like that fast-track consenting process is designed to actually say if you want to build a wind farm, it shouldn't take 8 years to consent it as it has been. It should take 1 year.
Right.
And then 2 years to build it, and then you get the benefit of it. And we know those wind farms have been good returns. They give us cheap, abundant electricity over the long run, which is what we need, and then transport and manufacturing will make that transition out of fossil fuels into green energy once we make it abundant.
That fast track is the great scam, according to some media outlets of the modern age, because Chris has written to all his friends who are donors to your party and then told them that
rubbish.
You can then fast track it, and so you're paying off your. Isn't that how it works?
No, that's rubbish.
What I'm reading. Radio New Zealand says they've found at least 2 businesses that somehow donated to your party that have been written to.
I'm sorry, but we can keep talking about building roads and houses and renewable energy in this country. We can do something about it, and I make no apologies. We're putting fast-track consenting, and we want a one-stop shop. All Chris Bishop did was send out a note to about 200 people, had a hang of a lot of iwi organisations that turns out want to participate in these sorts of investments as well, and a number of organisations making them aware of it. Just because they sent a letter doesn't mean it will happen, but we want as many people to be aware of the process. If you've got a project of regional national significance, we want to power through it and actually get stuff built. I mean, I am over the conversations. We have to get stuff done.
Okay, 3 strikes. As much as many of us would be on board with the broad idea, it appears to us from our research that the legal community don't like it, and they claim they don't like it from experience. In other words, their claim is it doesn't work. There's no evidence that it works. Where is the evidence?
Well, the evidence is the counterfactual. I mean, we had a government last time that had one key target, which was lowering the prison population, and lo and behold, violent crime's up over 30%. They repealed 3 strikes. They did a whole bunch of soft on crime stuff. None of that works. So I'm prepared to try anything and everything that works. That's why we're putting 500 more police officers in. That's why we're defunding Section 27 reports. We'll limit discounts from judges. We've got the gang laws coming, the youth offending stuff happening as well, and 3 strikes makes sense. I mean, go talk to someone who's actually been a victim of serious violent or sexual offending, right. And I don't care whether it just saves one person.
I agree, but explain to me why judges and lawyers don't seem to like it. Why don't they like it?
Well, I don't know. That's a question for them. What I'm saying is that the executive branch of government in Parliament, we're passing a law. We're making sure that we've make sure it doesn't capture low-level offences, which was the problem last time by putting this 24-month cap in place. We're giving some discretion around things like mental health, and we're giving a 20% discount if actually one of those offenders admits guilt, because I don't want to re-traumatise victims. But the bottom line is these are serious offenders, and frankly, Mike, we've got to have them off the street rather than causing damage to people.
And giving the judges discretion, though, isn't that part of the problem? I mean, you can argue the judges are soft enough now as it is, and the moment you give them the discretion, they'll just use that as an excuse, and therefore your policy fails, and they'll go look at you. There you go.
Well, I mean, we're passing it as a Parliament's sovereign in its own right, and we're actually passing a law here that we think is important, and we're making sure that judges understand that.
Speaking of Parliament being sovereign in its own right, the Waitangi Tribunal, where do they get off summonsing a minister?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be a bit careful here because we kicked off High Court action yesterday.
Why?
Because we kicked off High Court action yesterday.
Crown Law kicked it off. That's not you.
Yeah, but it is me. And so as a result, I can't comment too much about that.
Stuck into them.
Well, what we've got
pull their head in.
Well, what we've got is actually, I think, a legitimate piece of work ahead of us, which is to say, what is the role, future focus of the Waitangi Tribunal going forward? We've settled an awful lot of treaty settlements. That work is, we've made a great progress through it. We've got a few more to do. We're working at pace to get that done. But there's a legitimate question to say, what should be the role and focus of the Waitangi Tribunal? We're going to look at that piece of work as a government. We'll do that in a proper and a considered way.
Over what period of time, by the way?
Well, sorry?
Over what period of time?
Well, we want to start that work this term immediately. So, I mean, we want to get into that piece of work.
What do they actually contribute now? Once the historic grievances are over, what are they actually contributing apart from being a pain in the bum?
Well, originally they were set up to give the historical evidence around the treaty settlements. That's what I'm saying, is we've got through the large majority of those, and there's a legitimate question looking out the front windscreen to say, what should it be the focus of in the future for the Waitangi Tribunal, and what should its focus be? We'll work our way through that in a proper, considered way.
But ultimately, if you want to take 7AA out, you can, because guess what? You're the government of the day.
And we are going to do it because, the reality is they are our most vulnerable children, and the priority is to make sure they're in loving, caring, good homes, and frankly, their ethnicity of which families they belong to, which families they are in looking after them.
Yeah.
It'd be great if the families, they can go to their families, fantastic. But actually the number one priority, the first thing you have to consider is making sure they are our most vulnerable kids. We have a huge obligation and huge responsibility to look after them as a government. And my focus is making sure that they end up in the best homes possible. And what we've seen is actually that I don't think there hasn't been the focus. And I want that to be the focus.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mike.
Catch up soon. Prime Minister Chris Luxon, 13 to 8.
At Spotlight, it's the final day. Save a massive 30% off store-wide, including Manchester home decor, fabric, sewing, craft, yarn, curtains and blinds.